Hey everyone, and welcome back to Newegg TV. My name is Paul. Today I'm here with JJ from ASUS, and we are going to be doing a demonstration of the new ASUS motherboard feature, that being the Dual Intelligent Processors 5, which allows for 5-way optimization, which is one better than 4-way optimization, which was previously available in the Z97 series. So JJ, first off, which motherboards does this particular demo apply to?
So this feature will focus for our mainstream series of motherboards, so everything from the Z97-A, as well as the Pro, the Deluxe, both variants of it, as well as our mini ITX, the Z97-i Plus, and lastly our Z97WS motherboard will all support this 5-way optimization, as well as this specific auto-tuning implementation.
Excellent. Now, for right now, as far as what processors are currently available, we're going to be demonstrating this with the 4770K.
Correct.
The K indicates it's an unlock processor, which means it's set up for overclocking. And then this system is basically going to go through and do 5-way optimization. So what are the 5 elements of 5-way optimization?
So you got a couple of different pieces to it, actually a few different pieces, but really the most important ones are going to be auto overclocking. The main portion to that, of course, is that it's specific auto overclocking to your CPU margin. As you probably know, right, different CPUs have different margin in terms of what they can overclock towards. So this is just essentially going to scale the frequency based on your CPU cooling solution. It's going to consider your memory by also applying the XMP profile. It will also actually now incorporate memory testing, so that's also another way that it will be specific to your CPU quality, as the memory controller can also influence what memory speeds you can run, especially as you overclock the CPU frequency, and also factor in your cooling solution and your power supply quality. Now, outside of the auto overclocking, it will also automatically calibrate all your fans that you have connected to the board. It will then do power optimization through our Digi Plus power management, where it will go ahead and optimize essentially all the power rules to be able to ensure that everything is optimally set for overclock-based performance. I can do then EPU optimization for power-saving aspects, such as shutting off secondary add-in controllers to be able to reduce power consumption, as well as make some other optimizations to power consumption. And then the last portion that you have there is the application tuning, which is a new part for the 5-way tuning, which what this allows you to do is that after you've gone ahead and run the auto tuning, you will be able to see the information at what your CPU was able to achieve, whether it's going to be in single frequency values or multi-core frequency values, and then from there you can then manually define those corresponding frequencies, as well as network and audio-based presets for any application that you like. So as just a quick contextual example, imagine we could go ahead and open up Battlefield 4 and the system would dynamically overclock to 4.6 gigahertz, automatically set the LAN profile to high, and automatically set the audio preset to game mode.
Awesome. And now I have one last question. What if I don't have a K-series CPU? What if I have a 4770 or something like that? Could I still use this software? You
could actually. Of course, the margin in terms of what you'd be able to overclock towards would be significantly smaller. But you can go in and you can enable BCLK overclocking, which those CPUs would support. But in most situations, I would generally advocate that you shouldn't do that type of overclocking because the margin is so small on BCLK, as well as that BCLK overclocking can sometimes affect other buses in terms of their stability, that overall it could tend to cause you probably more problems than it's really worth in terms of extending that margin. So overall, from at least the auto tuning or auto overclocking perspective, you'd best be served by utilizing with K-series CPUs. Okay, and the Fan Expert 3 implementation here would possibly be an option there if you didn't have a K-series CPU. And then I also wanted to point out that the Fan Expert 3 also applies to a broader range of ASUS Z97 motherboards that are out there right now, such as the Sabertooth series, the TUF series, such as the Sabertooth motherboard, as well as the ROG series. And WS, yes. And actually, everything from Z97 all the way up, every single Z97 SKU features Fan Expert 3 class fan controls. Beautiful. So why don't we get started? Okay. Sure, so there's a difficult procedure. It's actually pretty simple. So you can see here we're actually in the desktop, and we've gone ahead and opened up our AI Suite 3 system utility. And all we're going to do is go to the 5-way optimization button. Once we go ahead and go there, we're just going to click on it. And you're going to see that the first option that we're going to see is going to be some of the selection fields for how we go about the auto overclocking process. Okay. Now, by default, it's set to do extreme tuning and through ratio only. Extreme tuning is essentially just beyond a first initial preset. If you were to select fast tuning, it's pretty much going to auto overclock your system to approximately 4.3 gigahertz. It's just a baseline value. And then from there, it won't continue to auto overclock your system. But says we want to go ahead and try to auto overclock to the maximum of what our CPU allows for, we would go ahead and select extreme, because that will start off from the baseline preset and continue to dynamically scale to whatever our cooling solution as well as what our CPU allows for.
Okay.
And we're just going to go do the ratio, because that's going to be the most consistent in terms of stability versus doing overclocking via the BCLK.
Okay.
Now, new for this generation that we're going to offer is actually going to be some pretty cool functionality that we've worked quite hard on. So what we've gone ahead and done is that previously when you ran the auto overclocking portion of the 4-way optimization and now the 5-way optimization is that it would scale to whatever the maximum frequency was defined within 1.275 voltage.
Okay.
So whatever could be achieved up to that, regardless of whatever the frequency was, would be essentially what would be realized, assuming also your cooling solution could maintain the cooling of the CPU. But what we went ahead and did is we wanted to even be able to give more flexibility and granularity how users could define their overclock experience. So now we've gone ahead and incorporated the option that you can choose a start point for where you want it to overclock from.
Okay.
Now, we have the current system sitting in a stock or default configuration, so it's going to start from the baseline perspective. But if maybe you wanted to start to shorten the process, maybe at 4 gigahertz or 4.1 or something like that, you could go ahead and define that and have it start at that value. Another option below it is going to be target CPU frequency. So what this is instead of having it shoot towards the maximum frequency, maybe you're somebody that feels more comfortable of just shooting towards 4.3 or 4.4 gigahertz.
Okay.
So just select that, so you could go ahead and just, use the slider and drag down to that corresponding frequency. Once you've gone ahead and done that, you would just hit apply. And what it will do is it will attempt to auto-tune up to that frequency. If your CPU within the 1.275 max voltage can reach that, then it will go ahead and get you settled in there. If your CPU can't achieve that due to maybe either it can't fit within that 1.275, it will get as close as it can. Okay. But essentially this allows you to just define the overclock based off of a specific target. Below that, we have another one that's really, I think, going to be popular amongst a lot of users, which is going to be able to define auto overclocking based on temperature. Oh, okay. So a lot of you guys sometimes are interested in saying, hey, I want to be able to auto overclock my system, but I never want it to be able to go over 75 or 80 or 85 C. Well, guess what? We can track the temperature during the entire auto overclocking process, and the moment that, let's say, it gets to that trigger temperature that you've defined, it will stop the auto overclocking process, giving you that last result that maintained underneath that target temperature. Mm-hmm. So overall, this gives you a huge degree of granularity. I mean, when you really think about this level of control and flexibility, it's just something that's never existed before with an auto overclocking. Even compared to our previous generation, which was pretty much the best option, we've just even made it that much better with giving you this type of control.
Very nice.
And lastly, right here, you can see that we have now also incorporated memory stress testing. And the reason why we did this is many users don't fully understand that as you scale CPU frequency, the memory controller can inversely have problems scaling memory frequency. And what our auto-tuning technology does to make the process simple for users in terms of maximizing their performance is that if you have XMP memory, it will automatically apply your XMP profile for you when it goes the auto overclocking process. The problem with that is that potentially there are some small sets of scenarios where some of the weaker memory controllers, let's say the CPU could get to 4.6, 4.7 gigahertz, maybe the memory gets to 2132, 2400, the CPU technically cannot run 2133 with 4.6 gigahertz. So in that situation, it actually will default to a lower memory divider, a lower frequency, to help to ensure stability. Okay. Now this does slightly extend the amount of time that it takes to do the auto overclocking process, but for users that want the best stability, then this would be a recommended option that helps you to maximize and make sure that your system is being tuned optimally and ultimately with the best stability for the components that you have.
Speaking of stability, I see we can also extend the duration of the stress test.
Correct, and this is something that more users also wanted the functionality for. In our internal analysis, we had close to about 85% of users in most situations had the stability test routine actually be fully stable for them. But in some situations, some users found that there still may be the possibility that they might have just slightly modified the voltage. So we've actually made the stress test algorithm even a bit more intensive this generation. But to be able to give you a little bit more control over how long the stress test runs, you can go ahead and define the time in between intervals. So what that allows you to do is all the way up to an hour in between intervals. So as the CPU scales up, if you don't want it to do those tests more quickly, you could set it to run for 5 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour so that it runs much more extensively. And we're also even looking to even enhance more features over time for this, such as maybe being able to run the entire system stress test once the actual entire auto tuning process has been completed for, let's say, a designated period of time. So you're definitely going to want to check back on our support site for more potential updates as we continue to refine this even further. But I think unquestionably here, you can see that what we're doing with forward optimization is pretty impressive.
Could even potentially double as a burn-in test for maybe a new CPU cooler installation.
Yeah, 100%. You can entirely do that, and then of course track that information, of course, with the logging information that's available to you within AI Suite 3 as well.
Very nice.
So at this point, all we're going to go ahead and do is just pretty much leave everything at defaults. We're just going to go ahead and enable the memory test so you guys can actually see the memory get tested. I'm just going to go ahead, for the sake of speeding up the process, I'm just going to go ahead and disable the EPU tuning portion.
Okay.
So it's not going to do the automatic power optimization. It will still go ahead and make all the adjustments, detecting my fans in my system and auto-calibrating them so that I can get that best balance of if I want to run the system in silent operation versus I want to run them at full performance. It will calibrate all of them so they know how fast and how effective those fans can run. And we'll also go ahead and maintain the Digi Plus power management.
Very nice.
So at this point, we're just going to go ahead and click Start and let it go through its process. So at this point, what the system's going to do is essentially it's received the information from the auto tuning program, and this is communicating on a hardware level and a firmware level to our UEFI to begin the auto tuning process.
Okay.
So what it will start off with is it will start with a baseline overclock, and once we get into the operating system environment, it would then begin to dynamically scale up the frequency. Now the thing that's really special about the way that we developed this program is, once I said, first and foremost, we're using a fixed max voltage, meaning that we're not going super aggressive on the maximum voltage that's allowed for. In our analysis, we found that 1.275 is realistically about the upper limit that any user would want to have, even with a high-performance cooling solution for Haswell-based CPUs. While you potentially could overclock further with, let's say, like 1.3, 1.325 volts, we feel that actually in real-world situations, especially under more extensive stress test applications, it's almost thermally impossible to cool that level of voltage.
Now, sorry, a quick question. We're expecting to see some additional CPU SKUs launch in the coming months that will also be compatible with Z97.
Yes.
Is this something that you guys will be perhaps doing UEFI updates for to account for the particular thermal characteristics?
We're currently undergoing a complete range of testing for any and all CPUs that will be compatible for this platform. And as we get the performance characteristics, we will go ahead and make fine-tune adjustments if that's needed based on the parameters of how those CPUs scale based on frequencies and other factors. So you can definitely feel confident, regardless of whatever CPU you run, if it's an unlocked part, this will be maximized to be safe, but also effective in terms of how it auto overclocks for you.
Excellent. So I know there's a lot of folks who are probably interested in Devil's Canyon when that becomes available.
For sure.
And this is definitely going to be an excellent way to easily determine just how far you can push your new CPU once you get it.
And you've even shown in the past how effective this tool is at being able to account for the variances that occur within CPUs. And also, speaking to that point, another really important part of the auto tuning process is that we use a very effective and safe form of voltage control where we don't use a manual fixed voltage, meaning that we don't keep the voltage permanently pegged at one set marker. So that 1.275 is not permanently in place. The actual voltage will vary depending on the load of the system, just like it would at normal traditional stock operation, making sure that one, you're minimizing voltage degradation likelihood, you're helping to improve power consumption, and you're also improving the overall thermal performance of the system as less voltage is being supplied to the CPU. So you can see here, we've got an entire new layout for how we've actually defined the system information as it's being dynamically adjusted. So you have your corresponding clock frequencies. You can have 1, 2, 3, and 4 cores all visible, seeing what actually is occurring in terms of those adjustments. We can go to our task manager also, and we can actually see the actual stress testing occurring real time here, and you can see that the stress testing is actually ramping up the CPU. And directly below that, you can also see other points of information such as the temperature. We're letting you know actually how hot the CPU is getting during the stress test and what's the actual offset of the thermal junction. Okay. So the thermal junction is generally about 100 C. So this is telling you in relation to that, how much below are you from that 100 C point. But keep in mind, of course, in relation to temperatures, that in all actuality, this isn't 100% really an impactor to how you use your system, because synthetic stress tests are significantly more demanding than if you're running a game or a web browser or real-world applications. Really, the only people that would really need to consider that this temperature is representative of how their system would actually run temperature-wise would be people that are doing content creation, such as image editing, photo editing, audio editing, things that are using persistent high-level multi-threaded loads. Now, directly below that, we can also see the amount of voltage that we're supplying to the CPU in real time and seeing how much is actually being incrementally added to the CPU to be able to maintain the frequency that we're pursuing. Whereas you can see here, we're at 4.5 gigahertz, so it's continued to go up, and you can see the maximum that's been defined.
Okay.
Now, as I noted, we're of course only going to go to a maximum of 1.275. And then lastly there, you can even see the actual wattage, so the power consumption that's aligned with this. So overall, we're giving you a really extensive level of information to understand really all the layers of how your system is automatically being overclocked. And you can see here, of course, in this real-time stress testing, we're doing some really awesome stuff with hitting all these cores really heavily and hard, but we're also even now fully testing out the memory. You saw the memory there getting up to over 7.8 gigabytes in terms of the actual load. And as I noted here, of course, you can customize this to your extent. So if you want it to be able to run longer versus shorter, it's entirely up to you. Now you can see here we've got a very good cooling solution. We're running a Corsair a closed loop water cooling solution. This is the H110, so of course it's got quite a bit of cooling capability in there, and we've got a great power supply with an AX850, so this is also helping to make sure that we got solid quality power delivery for, of course, our entire motherboard and for our CPU as we're overclocking. Now, as we continue, of course, this auto overclocking process, the last portion I want to just show you here is that also we've automatically enabled the XMP profile so that you guys can see the immediate value of how we've gone ahead and also automatically enabled this for you. From there, we're pretty much wrapping up, I think, this really cool demonstration of showing you how to dynamically auto overclock your system, but specific to your hardware configuration and allowing you to realize the best value possible when you go ahead and get your build set up.
And just so you guys know, at the point when this achieves its maximum overclock is the point when you will probably experience a blue screen, but don't worry about that, that is normal. That's what will happen, that's what tells the software. That's about as far as it can go. It will generally, will it step just one step back from that? And
correct, yeah. It'll count that into consideration, and it'll make an adjustment to go ahead and go back to the last stable setting. So we can see here we're probably going to get pretty close to that because we're at that 4.7 gigahertz right now, actually across all cores. But you can see right here that we've also already gone ahead and set our memory where we've got some fantastic Corsair Vengeance Pro memory. So it's an XMP kit 2400, and we can see that we've automatically enabled that for you. So overall, if you buy an ASUS board with this auto tuning technology and 5-way optimization, you get your XMP memory, you've got a great cooling solution, you made the investment in a good quality power supply. It's really the simplest and easiest way for you to go ahead and be able to go ahead and maximize all that hardware so you get the best performance possible.
This is also what I call the fun part, because if you're going with a CPU that you've never done this before, you're really not sure how far it's going to be able to go.
Correct.
And I had a chance, at least with the Z87 Pro, to check the prior version of this software out. And I actually had a full set of processors I was testing. So each one you drop in there and be like, is it going to keep going? Oh, it hit 4.8. Can it do 4.9? And yeah, and so it's kind of fun, and it's definitely so much faster than the old method. Could have
so much faster, much more
resetting.
effective, and the big thing is that it's also validated. We've spent a huge amount, literally by the time our boards have come from the design stage to production stage, we've spent tens of thousands of man hours in the design of the boards, the firmware development, the topology, and the software to be able to ensure that you guys can have a much more seamless experience versus kind of the headache of sometimes having to figure all these things out and be able to complicate the process versus really being able to give you manual class overclocking experience, but done automatically.
Excellent. So there is about as far as we're going to get to go, and I think
it was at already about 4.8.
So I think it was 4.9 on all
yeah.
4 cores is what that hit. So chances are it's going to bump that back to 4.9 on 2 cores and 4.8 on.
It'll probably actually bump it down further, probably 4.8 on 1 and 2 cores, and then 4.7 on all 4 cores.
But still a very significant overclock.
Correct.
And definitely an easy way to do that. I mean, in just a matter of time in the conversation that we had, overclock the CPU to
pretty much
the percentage off the top of my head, but
the upper limits of what you can support. And we do want to preface this once again, like I said, the big thing that's really special about this is that it's based on the margin of what your CPU and your entire configuration has. You could have 100% this same exact configuration, and you might have a part that might only achieve 4.3. You could achieve 4.6, could be 4.5. The big benefit is ultimately this is going to be specific to your hardware and your configuration. And here we just wanted to be able to give you guys some insight into what the process looks like and how simple it really is to be able to really take advantage of all the hardware.
Excellent. Now, if we can take one more quick step before we close here, JJ, the 5th part of the 5-way optimization was going to be that app tuning software. Do you think you could pull that for us really quick and show us?
So it's actually going to need to finish going through the last portion of the auto tuning process.
Okay.
So allow that to occur, which is pretty much just going to be the fan tuning process. what you're seeing right here is actually, we hear our system ramping up. What's happening is all the fans are being dynamically real-time calibrated.
Okay.
So every single one of these fans is essentially being detected for what their minimum operation rate is, as well as what their maximum operation rate is. The benefit to that is that if we start to use the fan control functionality that we have in Windows, if you, let's say, set the silent profile, it actually will turn off all the fans because it knows what their minimum operating curve is. Or if you go to standard, it knows what actually a balanced mid profile is because it's calibrated all the fans. Okay. So this is a really big value add that you have that occurs automatically as you go through the optimization routine.
Also provides the benefit of if you have, say, a mishmash of fans in the
you get the best
system,
experience, definitely.
It'll automatically detect each one, and it's not necessarily just sort of like a. It seems a lot more precise to me.
Well, it is, because you make a very good point. Sometimes other vendors may even have fan controls for those headers, but the important thing to keep in mind is that if you just use a preset, that preset may actually be a different experience depending on the fan. Some fans, might operate up to 1200 RPM, other one 1500 RPM, some might operate to 2100 RPM. So of course that's going to be an entirely different experience.
Alrighty,
So here it's just finishing up that last portion, and we're now going through the Digi Plus power control, which is optimizing all our VRM tuning parameters like overcurrent protection, load line calibration, phase response, phase loading management. All those things are automatically be tuned for you.
Okay.
And you can see here we actually finished up on what I said. So 4.8 gigahertz on 1 and 2, and then 4.7 gigahertz on 3 and 4.
Very nice overclock.
So at this point, what we could then go ahead and do is we could just go over to the Turbo app function. Okay. We're going to need to set this board into auto mode. And once we go ahead and do that, we can click on. And once we go here, you're going to see that you have a list of different EXEs that are available to you. So if, let's say, we went ahead and we opened up an application. So I'm just going to go ahead and go here to, let's say, Cinebench, for example. If I go ahead and open up that program, once it's open, I can refresh and I can scan for it, and you're going to see that it now shows me Cinebench.
Okay.
So once I click that, I'm just going to go ahead and add that into that list, and you'll now see that I have the ability to define the frequencies for that. So if I want to go ahead and manually set it to always operate at 4.9 on, let's say, one thread, or 4.8 on all threads, it would depend on the program, but you can define that information. Then you can go ahead and just set that. So if, let's say, I was happy with those values, I'd leave that there and I'd have that set. And then also, depending on the application, if there was need to, you could also prioritize things like the audio, where you can see where we can go with the default audio driver, which is just straight stock, or we can use those optimized audio presets that we worked with DTS Group on, where we have for music, movies, or games. So you can imagine that, let's say, if instead of opening up Cinebench, we opened up Battlefield 4, we would, of course, want to set that to game. And then we could also go and set here the LAN prioritization to high, so that we make sure that we have the lowest ping and the lowest latency performance. And then once you save all those settings, that's now going to permanently be saved there. And as you open up that application, it will automatically adjust to whatever settings you defined here. So you can imagine, of course, adding in more and more programs here that you could dynamically have different defined overclock profiles for, along with different different profiles for the audio and for the network.
So I can see, for instance, a game you might do a more modest overclock. So you get a little bit of a boost, but you don't necessarily have the fans ramping up to cause more noise while you're gaming. But then for me, if I was editing and I wanted to render with Premiere, for example, you could set that up to do the maximum overclock. So just while you're rendering and outputting a video, you could get a much faster rendering time, and you might have a little bit more fan speed at that point. But it gives you the option to set it however you would want.
And you can prioritize performance. More importantly, as you noted with Premiere, you could then maybe also consider Lightroom, which Lightroom is actually only singular threaded. Where Premiere, you would want to go with the highest all-core overclock. On Lightroom, you maybe actually want to have a high-level single-thread overclock.
Okay.
So you could actually get much better performance as opposed to using that fixed all-core overclock, and you could have that set up per each one of these applications. So that rounds out the functionality that we've introduced here with 5-way overall. In terms of that 5-way optimization, pretty impressive stuff.
Very nice. So again, guys, this has been 5-way optimization, available on the ASUS line of Z97 motherboards, from the Z97A all the way up to the Z97 Deluxe. JJ, thank you so much again for stopping by today and sharing all of this information with us.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'd love to hear your guys' feedback as well. We worked really hard on incorporating these features and functions, so I definitely will be checking out your guys' comments and replying to them as well. So feel free to go ahead and drop them into the comment section. I'd love to see what you guys think about what we've done for this generation.
Perfect. And while you're down there, go ahead and hit the like button as well. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next time.